Congratulations, Ryan Cordell, you are the 48th most essential White Sox player. Cordell earned 31%, 13 of 42 votes. Earlier this season, Cordell was named the 19th top prospect in the White Sox system with 35% of the 19th vote. If there's a player you feel has been overlooked so far in voting, write him in by making a comment below. You have one last chance to do so. Evan Skougs earned 0% of the past vote, and this late-in polling is eliminated from the most essential voting. With Cordell advancing and Skougs dropping off, Jamison Fisher and Alex Collar added to the ballot. Southside Sox most essential White Sox vote for 2018: Yoan Moncada, 34%, Jimenez 28%, Abreu 21%, Capech 11%, Lopez, Robert 2%, Cease 1%, Anderson, Giolito, Hansen 0%, Eloy Jimenez, 38%, Capech 26%, Abreu 17%, Lopez 7%, Rodon 5%, Anderson 4%, Giolito 1%, Cease, Hansen, Robert 0%, Michael Capech 59%, Abreu 14%, Lopez 10%, Robert 7%, Rodon 4%, 8, Anderson 4%, 7, Giolito, Dunning 1%, Cease, Hansen 0%, Dane Dunning 26%, Lopez 20%, Abreu 17%, Rodon 13%, 36, Robert 13%, 34, Anderson 6%, Giolito 4%, Cease 1%, Bertie, Hansen 0%, Reynaldo Lopez 31%, Abreu 21%, Robert 19%, Anderson 9%, Giolito 8%, Rodon 7%, Cease 5%, Hansen 2%, Berger, Bertie 0%, Luis Robert 33%, Abreu 25%, Rodon 18%, Anderson 12%, Cease 7%, Giolito 3%, Hansen, A. Garcia 1%, Berger, Bertie 0%, Jose Abreu, 33%, Rodon 27%, Anderson 18%, Cease 11%, Hansen 5%, Giolito 3%, Bertie 2%, Rutherford, Berger 1%, A. Garcia 0%, Carlos Rodon, 39%, Anderson 25%, Cease 13%, Sanchez 11%, Giolito 5%, Hansen 4%, Rutherford, A. Garcia 1%, Bertie, Berger 0%, Tim Anderson, 44%, Cease 20%, Hansen 13%, Sanchez, Giolito 8%, A. Garcia 3%, Bertie, Davidson 2%, Berger 1%, Rutherford 0%, Lucas Giolito, 31%, Cease 23%, Hansen 18%, Sanchez 16%, Davidson 4%, A. Garcia, Rutherford, Bertie 2%, Fulmer, Berger 0%, Dylan Cease, 50%, Hansen 19%, Sanchez 10%, Bertie 5%, Berger 4%, Davidson, Fulmer, A. Garcia 3%, Jones 2%, Rutherford 1%, Alec Hansen, 50%, Sanchez 14%, Davidson 7%, Adolfo, Bertie, Rutherford, A. Garcia 6%, Fulmer, Jones 3%, Berger 1%, Yolmer Sanchez, 21%, Adolfo 18%, Bertie 17%, Rutherford 16%, A. Garcia 8%, Davidson 6%, Berger 5%, Fulmer, Jones 4%, Basabe 2%, Micker Adolfo, 27%, Bertie 19%, A. Garcia 16%, Rutherford 12%, Davidson 11%, Jones 6%, Berger 4%, Basabe 2%, Fulmer, Delmonico 1%, Zach Collins, 37%, Bertie 18%, Davidson 13%, A. Garcia 12%, Rutherford 5%, 7, Basabe 5%, 6, Berger, Fulmer 4%, Jones, Delmonico 2%, Blake Rutherford, 22%, Bertie 21%, A. Garcia 14%, Davidson 13%, Basabe 10%, Berger 8%, Adams 5%, Fulmer 4%, Jones 2%, Delmonico 1%, Zach Bertie, 27%, Clarkin 18%, Davidson 15%, A. Garcia 9%, Berger 8%, Basabe, Adams 7%, Fulmer 6%, Jones 2%, Delmonico 1%, Ian Clarkin, 26%, Berger 16%, A. Garcia, Davidson 15%, Basabe 11%, Fulmer 6%, Adams, Jones 4%, Sheets 3%, Delmonico 0%, Matt Davidson, 25%, Berger 20%, A. Garcia 16%, Zavala 14%, Basabe 12%, Fulmer 7%, Adams 4%, Sheets 2%, Delmonico 1%, Jones 0%, Luis Alexander Basabe 27%, Berger 26%, A. Garcia 14%, Zavala 13%, Adams 7%, Fulmer 5%, Jones 4%, Sheets 2%, Castillo, Delmonico 1%, Jake Berger 26%, A. Garcia 14%, Zavala 13%, Adams 7%, Fulmer 5%, Jones 4%, Sheets 2%, Castillo, Delmonico 1%, Sebi Zavale 28%, A. Garcia 26%, Stevens 10%, Gonzalez, Fulmer 9%, Adams 8%, Jones 5%, 7, Sheets 5%, 6, Castillo 1%, Delmonico 0%, Avisail Garcia 34%, Gonzalez 22%, Adams 15%, Fulmer 9%, Stevens, Sheets 6%, Cordell 3%, Delmonico 2%, Jones, Castillo 1%, Spencer Adams 26%, Gonzalez 23%, Stevens 17%, Fulmer 15%, Jones 6%, L. Garcia, Delmonico 4%, Castillo 3%, Sheets, Cordell 2%, Luis Gonzalez 23%, Stevens 18%, Fulmer 15%, Jones 5%, L. Garcia 4%, Sheets 3%, Castillo 2%, Delmonico, Cordell 1%, Jordan Stevens 33%, Fulmer 32%, L. Garcia 9%, Jones 8%, Sheets 7%, Delmonico 4%, Guerrero 3%, Cordell 2%, Puckett 1%, Castillo 0%, Carson Fulmer 36%, Sheets 18%, L. Garcia, Vieira 12%, Jones 11%, Delmonico, Puckett, Guerrero 3%, Cordell, Castillo 1%, Gavin Sheets 28%, L. Garcia, Jones 16%, Guerrero, Vieira 9%, Delmonico 7%, Puckett, Cordell, Castillo 4%, Thompson 1%, Lincoln Hensman 27%, L. Garcia 21%, Delmonico 15%, Jones 12%, Cordell 9%, Vieira 8%, Guerrero 7%, Castillo 1%, Puckett, Thompson 0%, Lurie Garcia 17%, Tilson 17%, Vieira 14%, 22, Delmonico 14%, 21, Guerrero 12%, Jones 10%, Castillo 6%, Puckett 5%, Cordell 3%, Engel 2%, Charlie Tilson 17%, Vieira 14%, 22, Delmonico 14%, 21, Guerrero 12%, Jones 10%, Castillo 6%, Puckett 5%, Cordell 3%, Engel 2%, Hill and Covey 53%, Hamilton 21%, Vieira 5%, Delmonico, Castillo, Bummer, Cordell 3%, Jones, Guerrero, Engel, Puckett 0%, Ian Hamilton 39%, Vieira, Delmonico, Bummer 10%, Jones, Engel, Shields 6%, Castillo, Guerrero 5%, Cordell 4%, James Shields 41%, Bummer 15%, Delmonico 8%, Vieira, Jones, Guerrero 7%, Cordell 6%, Engel 5%, Irizarry 3%, Castillo 1%, Aaron Bummer 19%, Delmonico, Vieira 18%, Engel 15%, Jones, Guerrero 9%, Castillo 6%, Cordell, Irizarry 3%, Infante 0%, Thiago Vieira 19%, Delmonico 18%, Jones 15%, Engel 14%, Cordell 12%, Guerrero 10%, Castillo 8%, Santiago 4%, Irizarry 0%, Nicky Delmonico 25%, Jones 24%, Engel 20%, Cordell 12%, Guerrero 11%, Polo 5%, Castillo 3%, Santiago 1%, Nate Jones 28%, Engel 22%, Guerrero 17%, Cordell 11%, Castillo 8%, Rondon 6%, Polo, Thompson, Santiago 3%, Adam Engel 30%, Soria 25%, Cordell 17%, Guerrero 14%, Castillo 5%, Polo 3%, Rondon, Thompson, Santiago 2%, Joaquim Soria 31%, Cordell 15%, Guerrero, Polo, Narvaez 10%, Castillo 7%, Rondon, Santiago 6%, Thompson 3%, Jordan Guerrero 31%, Cordell 19%, Avilan 14%, Narvaez 11%, Santiago, Polo 8%, Castillo 6%, Thompson 3%, Rondon 0%, Bernardo Flores 32%, 2%, Palka 24%, Cordell 18%, Castillo 13%, Narvaez 8%, Avilan, Polo 3%, Santiago, Thompson, Infante 0%, J. Spry 55%, Cordell 13%, Palka, Curbelo 11%, Smith 4%, Castillo, Avilan, Polo 2%, Gonzalez, Narvaez 0%, Daniel Palka 24%, Smith 19%, Cordell, Curbelo 14%, J. Rondon 11%, Castillo 8%, Avilan, Polo 5%, Minaya, Volstad 0%, Luis Curbelo 50%, Smith 19%, Johnson 9%, Cordell 7%, Castillo 5%, Polo, J. Rondon 3%, Avilan, Farquhar, McClure 1%, Kevin Smith 30%, Cordell 20%, Johnson 18%, Irizarry 8%, J. Rondon, Avilan, McClure 7%, Castillo 5%, Polo, Farquhar 0%, Tyler Johnson, Cordell 29%, Avilan 11%, Narvaez, Irizarry 7%, J. Rondon, B. Rondon, Santiago 4%, Castillo 2%, McClure 0%, Ryan Cordell, Avilan, Narvaez, Irizarry 12%, Castillo 10%, J. Rondon, Yurchik, Santiago 7%, B. Rondon 2%, Skaug 0%, 0%, 0 votes, 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 0 votes, total vote now.